So I think there's a lot to do, especially also interlinking then shared micromobility with public transport in order to have like a higher accessibility of both services, especially in the outskirts.
For the majority of commuters or for pupils, there is a good connection between the outskirts and the city. But in the means of public transport, you cannot, not right now, and even in the pre-pandemic world, you cannot do public transport and other modes that are not individual for everyone and for every need. If you think in mostly your own mode, like we have a bus, we have a train, and in the decades before, we thought about how can more people can we get in the train or in the bus, maybe with an shared mobility or something. But we always thought from our point of view and from our mode, and that is not enough to really connect cities and the outskirts or within the city to people.
And Yasmin, based on that. How do you guys see at Voi, how do you see this changing? So throughout the pandemic, right, how has the role changed, or how's the role of mobility changing that connectivity that Thomas described?
Yeah, I think it has changed quite drastically. I mean, as you just also said, Thomas, I mean, in the end, it's if we then just also compare how the urban transportation planning looked like a couple of years back. So we had, of course, like urban transportation or public transportation as backbone, and we have private car, and then potentially then also, of course, bikes. But why shared micromobility has gained quite momentum recently, like especially in the past 2 years, is that we are covering then on last and first mile, but also covering also on network deserts. And that could be, for example, speaking then of equitable access on outskirts, but sometimes you just also look at like more inner city areas and tangential connections as well. So yeah, so I think there's a lot to do, especially also interlinking then shared micromobility with public transport in order to have like a higher accessibility of both services, especially in the outskirts. And for us also proof of the whole business model and of our service was also super proven actually in the pandemic. So just to show kind of some ballpark figures, but like the year-on-year growth was increased by factor 7 on our usage in the past year, and I think that's is like a strong indicator that e-scooters especially has been also kind of a safe answer towards towards mobility in the past years, or especially during the pandemic.
And as we're starting to come out, are you seeing those changes? Are those trends sticking with us, or are they kind of coming back to normal?
So what we see, it's still kind of stable, but of course I think the biggest challenge is we have then again like increasing also the share of intermodal use and helping also public transport in turn, that the demand is also picking up there, and then building more combined trips. So I think that's the biggest challenge what we see coming out of this pandemic now.
Yeah. Monica, from a BMW point of view, what are some of the lasting effects you're seeing, through your customers and through the mobility options that you offer? What are some of the lasting effects that you've seen out of the pandemic? And then now from your view, as we look to move forward, what are those challenges going to be that we're going to have to overcome? What are the tough parts?
Yeah, I think like Jasmine mentioned, we've seen a lot of change in the mobility patterns, especially longer drives are being moved from public transport or buses to the individual vehicle because of safety and health concerns. But in general, during the pandemic, especially public transport has lost a lot of customers, and they moved to the private car. And you would think that we would like this, because as a car company, we obviously like people buying cars. But on the other hand, if you have too many cars on the road and you have traffic jams, you have noise, you have pollution, that's also not good for our customers. And that's why we are talking to cities to see how we can improve this. So you talked about the lasting effects. I think some of the effects we're seeing mobility patterns somewhat returning to their original patterns. But for those where we still have some changes, I think we need to discuss how cities can change, how traffic management can change, and how maybe the product itself can change. Because like Thomas said, it's not one mode that's good for everybody. So I think we need to find a mix of various modes, and we need to have interaction between the individual modes. So the individual car, public transport, buses, the last mile transport. I think we need to take a look at how these interact, especially in the urban environment, but also in the connection to rural areas.
Yeah, some of the challenges that you described, so specifically things like congestion and so on, before the pandemic, they were already problematic and already heading in a problematic direction. And maybe that the pandemic only accelerated some of them. So you said things are coming back to normal, but even normal, the baseline was a problem, right? So how are you thinking about those challenges? And I assume you're already trying to, like you say, it's not a great experience for your customers. So what are some of the potential solutions?
Yeah, I think what we are currently looking at is the traffic management topic, because at the moment, and we have the advantage that we are going more and more into digital solutions. So I think this helps, can help cities a lot to implement more digital measures for traffic management, and all our vehicle fleet is also connected. So this is where we're looking at how we can steer traffic better. And I think what we're currently discussing is how we're also talking about inclusivity, especially people who come from the outskirts. They often actually need the car and they still need to go into the city. So we want to help cities develop strategies how they can improve the traffic situation without having to ban certain vehicles. So we're thinking about managing the traffic, maybe managing parking better, and to freeing up space for other modes of transport like biking, like electric scooters, etc.
You know, sometimes with great challenges come great opportunities, and the topic of the panel is supposed to be around recovery. So I'd love to give each of you a chance to just describe a little bit, you know, if we try to look on the bright side coming out, what are things that we learned through the challenge? So when we think about post-pandemic efforts, you know, what did we learn, and how can we apply that to improving the city and the outskirts? How can we improve that connectivity? So whoever wants to jump in first, feel free. But it would be great if each of you could jump in on that.
One of the best things is, from our experience, that the use of smartphones as information hubs of mobility has increased enormous through the pandemic. Because of you don't want to go to an counter and ask you have to change your ways you move. And you don't want to get in touch with the bus driver to buy a ticket, so there's an enormous willingness now to have e-tickets and other ways to get into mobility and to get information about mobility. And in the rural area, mobility, public mobility, not own car, is not as obvious as in big cities. The subway or the buses in the city are always there in your street. But if you live in the rural area and there's an on-demand service that would pick up you every 50 minutes, but you don't book it, you don't see it. It's not there, it's not obvious. But if you are on your mobile, you see, wow, there's so many opportunities to move, and that is really a big effort of good outcome of the pandemic, if you want to say so.
Mm-hmm.
I would also echo what Thomas just said. I mean, looking then specifically at the outskirts, we will face a different user base. What we see, like from our a more like urban user base, meaning where we have on average, like the average age of our users is between 25 and 35. And of course, looking then more on the rural area, we need also to understand more the users there and building also, for example, better pricing based on the needs that are given there. But I would also say that it was kind of a reset button as well. So it also like a lot of more conscious decisions that are now happen when it comes also to the mobility choice, and that is of course more in favor actually for us, and hopefully then also in the future more with public transportation, and again also with other multimodal providers. So. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can also echo the digitalization, but I want to add that also the focus on sustainability has sharpened, because I think especially in the urban areas, people have seen what their streets can look like if they have a little bit more space. You have restaurants going out on the streets, you have people biking, so you have people actually using more modes of transport than they used before. And I think that opened up the discussion with the cities in terms of going into a more multimodal direction, into intermodality, into how can we free up some space for all people. And I think this was good for the discussion overall, and also pushed a little bit the discussion in the direction of electric mobility, which is also important for us because it makes pollution is also a topic in the cities, and that's why we, especially in an urban environment, want to promote the electric mobility topics. And I think it sharpened the focus on what we need to achieve this, like charging infrastructure and things like that, especially also, again, if we're talking about people commuting, they need charging opportunities. So I think this is also an important point.
So a lot of the things that you're discussing around digitization of transport, around more sustainable transport or sustainable cities, those are things that we've been talking about for a long time, right? Also long before the pandemic. And we've had similar panels at the IAA for many years. So is there anything different this time? And question one and question two would be, how can we accelerate some of this change? So the promise of digitization, how do we finally accelerate that? Is the pandemic a natural accelerator, or how do we continue that acceleration, right? And how do we make sure that some of these changes kind of stick? Yeah? Thomas, you want to start?
It is different this time. First point, the pandemic situation and the boost of digitalization, a digital connection to the mobility. And the second point is we have now the opportunities through AI, not only to optimize one mode in connection to another, to optimize in one direction to get more people into train or on scooters, but to optimize the whole system, and that is new. And if we all together use these opportunities, we can really do it this time, and not only talk about and hope for the best, but now if we work together and use all the opportunities, we can really make a big leap forward.
I would like to add to what Thomas said. I think that's also the big change. Since we had this reset button, I think everybody is more open to discussion. We are not operating so much in silos, like this is the car manufacturer, this is the city, this is the micro-mobility provider and the public transport. And everybody's trying to gain market share, but we are more open to discussion and trying to develop win-win-win scenarios where everybody really gains from working together, and also together with the cities. So we have, as I said in the beginning, we have a lot of projects with cities all around the world where we're actually working together with mobility providers, with the city, and also as a car manufacturer, to improve traffic and to improve situations in the cities. And I think, from what I've been told, this collaboration that is pretty new.
So all of you are working on solutions or innovative solutions. I think Voy, by definition, is an innovation company, and your job is around innovation. So can you give us a peek maybe in the secret labs of, what are you working on that you're excited about? We've talked a lot about potential solutions, right? But what are you working on that's exciting for you that you think is a great solution? Yeah. You want to start?
Yeah, I think open the Pandora box. It's tough to say, but I think what we need is also not so much. I mean, what we will essentially need is much innovation also about micromobility, but it also starts with the right regulation in order to make this innovation happen. And the reason for this is that we still see, I mean, just in Europe, so I think we are completely at the edge now, where municipalities also going for licenses and tenders, but we need also, I mean, speaking then of public and private partnerships, I mean, that's the big topic, which is an opponent itself. And in all that debate, it's always neglected that we are, I mean, we want to get integrated in the mobility ecosystem. We want also to decarbonize kind of the transport we currently have in the city. But in order to do this, we need also to face kind of mid-long-term profitability. And for this, we need also to have the right regulation at hand, where cities have the opportunity to effectively say how the different mobility operators they have in the city have criteria on safety, like hardware related, but also sustainability related, so that we can have, for example, in an e-scooter domain, swappable batteries was kind of a game changer when it comes also to emissions per passenger kilometers. So things like that are essential in order to make also this change towards decarbonization of transport.
Two topics. The first one is a mobility as a service platform. Also not a new topic, but we had built one that is not our own. It's a white label platform that can be specific for rural areas, for small regions, for companies, and combine all the needs, the really needs of them. And we had introduced it now in 60 landscapes in Germany, and it works. It's cheap, and we have not integrated you, unfortunately. We're not working together in this for the public bodies, but it is a starting point of really getting mobility as a service platforms, not only in the cities and in a big context that is too big to use, but on small parts as mobility is in its logic for the most of the people. And that is really fun to see how it works. It really works. And the second topic is autonomous driving, obviously. It will be the big game changer for public transport. To do services in rural areas, in not so crowded places where mobility is everywhere, but in a low dose. So if we can do this, do autonomous driving and on-demand public transport in rural area, we can do public transport for a real majority or for everyone. And with different industrial partners, we really hope to have a big fleet, our own, and in the whole community of public transport operators in, let's say, 6 years, some thousand of cars on the street, and it seems to be possible.
Good.
Yeah, and for us, I think, aside from product innovation that is constantly going on, I mean, we have a couple of the mobility products also here at the IAA, at the open space, where you can test drive some of the smaller concepts that we have for the urban areas. We are also looking into digital solutions a lot. So, for example, with the plug-in hybrid, we developed a service where if you drive into the city, it automatically turns to electric mode. So the e-drive zones that they have been rolled out into over 100 cities. And we're trying to expand this service now, not only in the scope, but also in the in its focus. So we're trying to use this technology, for example, to do safety zones around schools. So we're currently working together with cities to implement this. And we also implemented, for the IAA, we implemented this technology. So if you drive towards IAA, you get a suggestion where to either change to public transport or park somewhere else if it's very crowded. So I think we're looking into the multimodal and intermodality topic also, how we can integrate the car into an urban ecosystem.
Monica, let's stick with you first for the next topic, but I'd like everybody to chip in, which is, you've already sprinkled it in from time to time, which is the idea of partnerships, right? You've already mentioned how important public-private partnerships are. You mentioned briefly the new kind of atmosphere of partnerships. Can you give us some examples of some partnerships you've seen that are especially effective in this regard, something that do you think is working well and is maybe a model?
Yeah, for us, it's actually the cities themselves. We usually have a team that consists of BMW experts of various topics, plus usually the mobility experts from the city. For example, with the city of Rotterdam, we have a memorandum of understanding for various areas where we look at traffic, we look at energy, we look at overarching topics as well. And then obviously we have some companies that work in the city. For Munich, for example, we're working together with Siemens, with MAN. So we also work together with other big companies in these topics and do the overarching things together.
Yasmin?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, for us, also super important to work, of course, with cities on the one hand. So I think there is no city where we don't have signed like any commitment or even then a license or tender. So this means, for example, that our service design is designed in a hyper-local approach based on the city needs. So speaking then of no parking zones where scooters are not allowed to end, like the ride gets ended. We have also incentivized parking zones, especially, for example, here in Munich, the city started also to replace actually car spots by micromobility or especially like e-scooter parking spots. And in order also to promote our users to park at this certain parking spots, we incentivize then also our users to park there, contributing also a bit to behavioral change. So there is a lot of service design, which is also underlined with the right technology and our back end. And then, I mean, yeah, often here public-private partnerships, but also like partnerships with commercial platforms enhances our accessibility of the service. Speaking then, for example, with Free Now, we have also like a close partnership. And I think a good example is also last autumn we partnered up actually with S-Bahn in Stuttgart, where we also, when we talk about like partnerships, for us it's also about building integrated transport solutions, and this starts also on a more physical infrastructure part, building also mobility hubs where public transport should orchestrate different mobility services directly at the stations. Important again to enhance the accessibility towards public transport, but also towards our service. And then we speak about also like digital integration, meaning then exactly like being part of the tech platforms of public transport. And then thirdly, also building the commercial offering. I think that we haven't touched upon, but essentially for speaking of recovery of transformation, we need also to build the right pricing in combination with private operators, but especially also with public operators, where e-scooter, for example, become part of the public transport subscription.
We have been always partners of cities as a transport operator, but the way we work together changed. In the last decades, the city told us where to drive, and we hired a bus driver, bought a bus and drive. But now we are working together on the future of mobility, if you want to say so, and then drive the bus. Or on-demand mobility and so on. So the partnership with the cities has changed for good. And other partnerships like industrial partners, so many in here. I don't want to emphasize one. And all partners we didn't want to cooperate 10 years ago, but now it feels very natural and good to work together, and of course we are connected to close to every university in Germany, and also that is different. In the past there was this research thing. They told us what to do, and we said, well, we just drive buses, sorry. And now we share data, we share ideas, and that is really good. Yeah.
Maybe one point that I want to make is the data topic. I think this is very important because I think that's something that we all work on, having common data standards, working with multimodal platforms, working with common data providers, and I think having these interfaces is crucial. And also to bridge the divide between the city and the rural areas, because the rural areas often don't think about digitalization, and this is something that we need to look at as well, because then we can more easily connect them.
That's actually a good transition to the next point I wanted to cover, which is, you know, we very often hop to cities, and when we talked about partnerships, we talked a lot about partnerships, public-private partnerships with cities, and we're talking about dense urban environments. But the title of the panel is The City and the Outskirts, yeah? And we haven't talked too much about the outskirts. It seems like we always head towards the city naturally somehow. So could we spend a bit of time just hearing from you, when you think about the outskirts, what does that actually mean? All right, what do you define as the outskirts, and how do you think about serving the outskirts? I think each one of you has to serve the outskirts probably very differently. So it'd be good to get your perspective on that. Monica, you started, so why don't you continue?
For us, obviously, the outskirts are very important because outskirts obviously sometimes means that you are not as well connected to public transport and you need individual mobility. Many of our customers live in suburban and rural areas, not in the inner city center. So I think for us, having this exchange between rural, suburban areas and urban areas is crucial. Which is why I was saying that closing off the city is probably not a good idea, because then you have only the city dwellers. They are happy because they can rely on last mile concepts, they can rely on public transport, but people who live in the outer areas, they often have an issue. This is, I mean, in Germany it's pretty good, but if you look at the US, many cities do not even have public transport. So I think we have to take a global perspective as well, and to see how we can combine various modes of transportation to provide accessibility to the urban areas where you have jobs, where you have places that people want to go.
Yeah, then just to add to what Monica just said, I think, again, I mean, for us, we are also, per definition, in dialogue with the city, that we expand also to outskirts. Usually it's kind of a leveled approach, starting in the inner city area, sharing also, I mean, from an e-scooter perspective, we have a standard called MDS, so Mobility Data Specification. That's the way how you share data, trip data, also with the city. So they see then also like the user behavior, where a lot of demand is, and then it's, even though I repeat maybe what you also just said, but actually it's the same, so the same approach. So we have then currently, we will have regular check-ins also with the city, speak about in which area we can also operate. So in Germany, for example, we are an unregulated market, a lot of operators are operating, so the question is also how can operators making sure that we don't offer our service in all the same areas, and so to answer the questions, we are also operating, of course, in the outskirts. But the question is then again how we can make sure that we are also spreading our service to the right areas, so that we are not cannibalizing with car sharing, even though there are different use cases, or with public transport, but making sure that that we have an effective integration there as well.
But it seems to me that by definition, your current service is not a service that's going to connect the outskirts to city centers, right? You're not going to be a connector, but it seems like you should be able to be one leg of that trip that somehow helps that connection, right? How are you thinking about that, about kind of helping bridge that urban-rural divide?
Yeah, so I think a good example is also when we started operations in Germany in 2019. We had also collaboration, for example, with Hochbahn in Hamburg, where we also trialed e-scooter in the outskirts, because again, like this was back then that we are only operating in the inner city area. So, and then we also trialed it in Bern and Poppenbüttel, both located in the east south of Hamburg, and also just, I mean, it's all about like trial and error, and get an understanding what is demand. So how we can make sure that the demand is also picked up then by then. And I think one important learning was then also, because in order to promote our service in combination with Hochbahn, that we offered a lot of free rides in order to, I mean, then again promote behavioral change and pick up the demand. But then we saw now, given that we had this trial for 6 months, so that there was kind of a behavioral change already seen. So they saw also that they could rely on commuting with an e-scooter to the certain stations. And right now, like Bern and Poppenbüttel are still one of their areas where we see the highest demand. So I think this is one of an example, like a successful example, why we should think also expanding in outskirts in dialogue with city and public transportation in order to build this service possibility.
Yeah, good. And Thomas?
I would love to do that together, because outskirts definition, I would say where we are, where we do our core business. From our 12,000 buses in Germany, 11,950 are in the outskirts. So we know where the outskirt is and how the problems there are. It's from capacity problem. If you have a 12 to 50 meter bus, it's always wrong. Yeah? In the morning, it's too small, and the rest of the day, it's too big. And to have the right capacity on the right place in the right time in combination with other modes is big problem of the outskirts doing public transport, and that is why we are on the search of the big optimum of everything, because we know we can't do this with 12-meter buses. Not if we really hard try, it's not possible. But in combination with different modes and in an optimization overall, that's possible, and it's really needed in the outskirts.
Good. All right, so maybe as one output of the panel today, we already created another partnership. Maybe. Start, maybe. Good. We just got a couple minutes left in our time, so I think I would leave kind of the last question open to each of you. Just if you could maybe summarize, what is the message you'd like to leave with us today when we think about the theme of the city and the outskirts and what recovery looks like? You know, what is your kind of final closing thoughts? So maybe 1.5 minutes each. Yasmin, feel free to start.
Sure. So I think for us, then looking at the usage we currently see also on the uptake, yeah, we truly hope that this will be stable, and then of course looking more in the future. hoping for the right regulation in across Europe as well, helping us then to leverage our business model, helping us to innovate, meaning then also, I mean, e-scooters itself are one mode, but we are currently looking also then in other modes, and I think there's a lot of discussion also around micromobility itself, looking, for example, also on e-pods, so small cars as well, and then also making sure how we can leverage the data even more with the city, so the city understands also then infrastructure extension. There is so much work to do in order to make also this transformation happen, and so there we need just to make sure that this is even more understood in the future.
I would say halfway through the pandemic, we still have the best opportunities in mobility we ever had. We have so many solutions and opportunities on the digital way, on the different modes, and on the mindset of the players, of the people, of the public bodies. We should really try to use that time the best, the next 3-4 years, to build something new and better, and that's it.
Good, thanks. Monica, last word goes to you.
For me, as somebody who's been looking into the mobility topics at BMW for quite some time, I'm really happy that we are now getting to this level of discussion, and that we're now looking more into the transformation, and that we're working together and we're getting into this dialogue. So also the change of the IAA to IAA Mobility, I think it makes me very hopeful that we are now going more into an integrative mode of all modes, and I think this is what I want to leave as my message, that working together, collaboration between different companies, but also public-private partnerships, as we mentioned. I think this is the way forward, and also the way out of the issues that we're facing with the pandemic.
Good. So I'd like to then close a little bit by taking the time to first thank Jasmina van Voy and Thomas van DB Regiobus and Monica from BMW for taking the time to share your experiences with us today.